Hi, my name is Dr. Kristen Palmer, and this presentation was intended for the Hawaii International Conference on Education, but due to travel restrictions, I won't be able to attend in person. This presentation is called Small Changes, Big Impact, Effective Pedagogical Practices Started During COVID to Keep for In-Person Courses. I'm the Director of Online Learning Programs at the University of Virginia. UVA is a public school. We have about 25,000 students, both undergrad and grad. We're an R1 school. So I was asked specifically about to help out when we transitioned due to COVID. We moved a little over 4,000 courses online over a period of 3 days, thanks to an enormous lift by our LMS team and our registrar. And we were looking at, 6 to 9 months into COVID, what were some of the innovations that we had in teaching and learning that we should maybe keep? And so we ended up creating a working group from one of our university teaching and learning with technology committee to look specifically at kind of faculty insights, silver linings, innovations to keep. And we ended up coming up with Small Changes, Big Impact. And over a 6-month period, we met with dozens of faculty, and we had each faculty record very short videos talking to specific pedagogical principles that they introduced in their class that they're definitely going to keep in person. And so today I'm going to talk to a few of those, but you can go to the Small Changes, Big Impact site. I've got the URL at the end of the presentation, and you can hear from the faculty themselves what they did. One of my favorite ideas was limiting access to discussion forums. There are so many online classes that are post or reply, post to the discussion forum and reply to 2 others for your grade, and they are the worst. And then they're open all semester and you have people posting into it and it's a month later and you end up getting your daily notifications and there's way too much noise. And so one faculty member did limited discussions where she had, this was specifically for a J-term course, which is a daily course over 3 weeks. And she had discussion forums only open for 1 day. And so you had to participate in that day. And if you missed that conversation, that's okay. Then you move on to the next conversation. But there was this very limited window to participate and it didn't kind of drag on all semester. Another great idea was a synchronous movie night. This was with one professor who was in kinesiology or is in kinesiology. And he had the movie available from our library. And then they did a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown and everybody started watching the movie together. And then they do evidence-based citations of the movie during the movie. And so the movie was Concussion and they talked about the medical evidence behind it and they'd cite resources and they, people pop popcorn and brought candy. And it was a great community building time. But looking at something that's in our social media culture and then really looking at it from a research academic lens together as a class. Another idea was 3-point summaries. And this was, there were different levels of this, like before a lecture, having 3 key points that you want people to take away during, for an entire class, having 3 main lessons that you want students to learn at the end of the class, but having these 3-point summaries. So it was very specific and students knew, hey, I need to pay attention on these 3 key areas. Many people use the Google Suite for a variety of best practices. One was each person in the class creating an intro slide, including how to pronounce their name that anyone could reference at any time so they could get to know each other a little bit more in the virtual classroom. And also there were several faculty that talked about creating these interactive worksheets or having worksheets that people had to kind of fill in the blank during classes to take notes for classes rather than, so it was more of a team effort of taking notes rather than individual notes. Another great idea was previewing weekly content. And I have it here as the word cloud because this particular faculty member used Pull Everywhere and she would create polls at the beginning of the class to kind of prime the pump on what students were thinking about before they went into the lecture and the learning activities for that time, so that they'd have more frame of reference for what they were going to be talking about. Another huge one was virtual office hours and using breakout rooms. And so bringing in guest speakers or having virtual office hours, it turned out it was way more inclusive. We have stories of faculty talking about, they had online versions of their morning meeting in pediatrics, and more people ended up showing up for more different specialities because it was easier to tune in. We had other classes where they invited alumni and they'd go into breakout rooms based on interests with current students, so they were building a relationship with that. And then a lot of feedback from many different faculty members on just more people showing up for office hours, and even just opening up the room and letting students work on problems together where you're in the office hour, but not necessarily talking, but you're available if there are questions or help. So almost like a study session for students that's voluntary during your office hours. Another great idea was taking the first 5 minutes of class to not talk about class, pairing students up with other people in the class so that they'd have a one-on-one with someone else, that you talk about something not related to class, like, oh, the weather here is like this, or how are you dealing with COVID? How, you could talk about school, but it was more of a building relationships within the class, student to student, where it's almost like that beginning of class, end of class, kind of sitting down in your desk and saying, hey, howdy to the person next to you, but intentionally doing it in an online class, using the first 5 minutes of class to pair people up to have that casual conversation. So again, you can see the faculty videos at the following URL. It's CTE is for our Center for Teaching Excellence, the cte.virginia.edu/small-changes-big-impact. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and attention today.